from God's Unchanging Word Studios in New Orleans, we are pleased to bring you news, nuggets, and insights with today's host, Tom Carey.
Well, greetings, everyone, and welcome to God's Unchanging Word, another edition for our news, nuggets, and insights. Today is Friday, June 14, 2019, Father's Day weekend. We got a Father's Day special here for you today. A number of videos we want to share with you, but we had a lot of information I need to bring you, a lot of disturbing information, so let's get started right away. First, we're going to talk about Georgia, ground zero for the pro-life fight. It's interesting what's going on there, how the left now is weaponizing industry to hurt entire states for standing up for God's truth. Then we're going to talk about illegal immigration and the potential risk of Ebola right here in the United States. A third category we're going to follow is Follow the Money. This is a beginning series I'm going to start today. We're going to talk a lot about this over the weeks and months ahead. And you're going to find in the next few years how important it's going to be to understand where we are in a financial picture. We start that today. And then we're going to do something that you may not have heard about before. How many people who are tuning into this have heard about a parenthetical insert? And by the way, a parenthetical insert in our Nuggets program, which talks about Ephraim and Manasseh, tribes in Israel, and why a misunderstanding takes place. And it's because of a misunderstood parenthetical insert. So stay tuned for the second half of the program. We're going to talk about that also. So let's begin, first of all, with a happy Father's Day, and say that to all the fathers who are out there. And we're going to have a little video here, and this is very humorous. Actually, we have two of them. We played these last year, but they were so funny, we had to play them again. So our first video is Stuff You Never Hear Dad Say. Take a look, and we'll be right back.
I don't care how late you stay out. Stay out as late as you want. You want to borrow the new car? You want to borrow my credit card? Kids today, they really have it rough. I have no idea where we are or where we're going. I mean, when I was their age, life was easy, super easy. Why haven't you gotten a tattoo yet? How come you don't have any piercings yet? Yep, we're lost. We are completely lost. Ooh, sports. Just do whatever the mechanic says to do. Vehicle maintenance is completely overrated. Look, whatever the mechanic is asking, just pay him. Pay him whatever he wants. I wish they had soap operas at night. I like that boy. You should date him. You should date him immediately. Well, what about the creepy guy with the motorcycle? He's cute. Yeah, sure. Spring break in Tahiti sounds fun. Hey, make sure you get all your video games done before you start your homework. You don't have to pass all your classes. What? You have a project due tomorrow and you've known about it for 4 weeks and you haven't started yet? Sweet! Doesn't anybody want to know if we're there yet? Remember, if you need anything between midnight and 4 a.m., please come wake me up. Hey, I'm on the phone. Could you bring the baby over and let him climb all over me? Hey, can you please turn that music up? Well, we just stopped for lunch 10 minutes ago, but yeah, let's stop again. I never have trouble with my toddler. I never have trouble with my teenagers. I never have trouble with my adult children. You know, she's right. We are ruining her life. Yes, more homework to correct. All right, whining. Yay, tantrums. Vomit. We just really need to spoil these kids more. Sorry, buddy. I don't know any good jokes at all. You're 16. You pretty much know everything now. I think 18's a great age to get married. Okay, remember, make sure you turn on all the lights before you leave the house. Hey, could you leave the front door open for a couple hours? Thanks. Whoa! Money really does grow on trees.
Well, those are really, really funny videos. Actually, the second ones are even funnier than the first. Couldn't help but to play those, so I hope you enjoy them. All right, so let's get started, first of all, with global warming 2030. You've heard a lot of people talk about 2030 and global warming, the Pope, you've heard the UN. But I want to share with you a story of something you may not have heard about, sorry. This is from 2018, this is 2030. It says, we will pass the point where we can't stop the runaway climate change. All right, the reports are running everywhere that we have until 2030 to make changes before it's too late to save our planet. Now, while this may sound new, It's actually not. Let me bring you a report that someone sent to me. This is back from several years ago. This is an article called Saving the Planet. The UN predicts disaster if global warming is not checked. Coastal flooding, crop failures would create an exodus of eco-refugees threatening political chaos, said Noel Brown, the director of the New York office of the UN Environmental Program for UNEP. He said governments have a 10-year window of opportunity to solve these greenhouse effects before it goes beyond human control. As warming melts polar ice caps, ocean levels will rise up to 3 feet, enough to cover the Maldives and other flat island nations, Brown told the AP in an interview on Wednesday. The United Nations senior environmental official says entire nations could be wiped off the face of the earth by rising sea levels if the global warming trend is not reversed by the year, that's right, 2000. That was a report. Sounded fresh, didn't it? That was a report that came out in 1989. They gave us 10 years back in 1989, or it was all going to be over. So I brought in a little highlight here of a news report that came out around the same time about the United Nations. Senior UN environmental official says entire nation is going to be wiped off the face of the earth by rising sea levels if global warming trend is not reversed by the year 2000. But you're not going to hear that honesty in the news. It's because it's not about the global warming. It's about control. It's about a very devious, very cynical, and very satanic move to try to remove God and take control over this planet before Jesus Christ returns. That's what it's all about. So I wanted to bring that to you, just as a little way of touch base. All righty, let's get to this. Ground Zero in Georgia. Abortionists targeting Georgia to bring their fight to the 2020 election. Again, if you notice today, all of the fights and the things that are taking place, they have a religious root to them. And that's where the evil continues to rise, because anything that's left that has a God-oriented figure into it, a principle, a direction, Satan is going after. So when you talk about pro-life, human life, and doing the right thing, it infuriates Satan, so he goes after to try to destroy it. So when you see a state like Georgia who passes a law, just absolutely just destroys the left, or the ungodly, as I call them, those who want to destroy life, and begins to attack. So now they're using and rallying entire businesses to try to destroy the state to get them to get their way. New York Times calls unborn babies, this is amazing, unborn babies an embryonic pulsing. Now, why are they doing that? Well, it's because the laws are changing. The laws are changing to say if there is a heartbeat, if there's a heartbeat, then that's a life, and you cannot take the life, you can't have an abortion. So thus, since they're looking at the child in the embryonic sac, and it's got a heartbeat, they have to call it something else, otherwise the law will apply to them. So now they're using a new term, brand new. An embryonic pulsing is no longer a heartbeat from a baby inside a womb. Absolutely amazing. I don't know, the satanic, how do these things come about? Sometimes I just get a loss for words trying to describe them all. So here we have in lifenews.com says that the language dehumanizes unborn babies and ignores decades of scientific evidence. All right, so this new terminology is not based on facts or scientific evidence, Bolger said. It's based on an agenda that supports abortion on demand. It disguises the truth and attempts to manipulate the public into believing something different from what they know to be true. That's what God says, you prove all things. Hold fast that it is true. So that's what they call wrong right and right wrong, called evil good and good evil. You're in that day and time that we live today. But this is absolutely amazing. It never ceases to amaze you that God says to the pure, all things are pure. So you never think, well, how evil can go. But it finds a way to usurp the reality of truth, to bring in an evil, create a lie, and make it now their truth. And that becomes their God, by the way. And they worship it. Hollywood. Now, Hollywood, Georgia, boycott grows as Disney and Netflix considers joining the same band. Some of the biggest names in the film and television, including Walt Disney, Warner, media and have suggested that they boycott Georgia. More states passed stricter anti-abortion bills. Hollywood is turning up the heat on Georgia, that the state that, thanks to its tax breaks for film, television, and commercial and productions, took in $2.7 billion direct revenue in 2018. So their goal is to threaten them. If you do not turn this around, all the business we brought to your state, we're taking it somewhere else. Well, it'll be interesting to see if they'll actually risk that, because they got some pretty huge tax breaks to be over there in Georgia. In addition to that, now this is something I think we all need to be aware of, because God says that Satan is the God of the air, of our airways on this planet, is that because of the airways, all the money is moving into that sort of realm. So there's no end to the funds, to the millions, the hundreds of millions, the billions of dollars that gets poured into trying to destroy the conservative Christian value. Here's another one right here. Hollywood producer launches campaign to fight pro-life laws across the U.S. Hollywood producer and investor Peter Chernin has started a campaign to raise millions of dollars fighting an anti-abortion laws in Georgia and calling on other media moguls to join him. He said, "I'm launching a campaign to contribute to the $15 million that is needed to fund the ACLU's legal efforts to battle the national anti-abortion effort." Jonah wrote that in his latest email. So here we have those who have millions of dollars, the mega millions of dollars around the world. They pool their efforts to destroy anything that closely resembles a godly society. And that's what's going on with all of these things. And it's not going to stop as long as Satan is in charge of this world. And that's why Jesus Christ is coming back to put an end to all of this. And this is why, by the way, our program, we focus on these things every single week, and why we ask everybody to help us. It's really easy. When you get your email alert, you can just forward it to your friends. In fact, forward it to everybody you know. And as we say at the end of the program, they were going to love you for it. Or not. God willing, one day, that little nudge that you send to them may make a difference in their lives, because it's going to be very important in the days to come. The Writers Guild of America threatens to boycott Georgia over the fetal heartbeat bill. The Writers Guild of America released a statement saying that they would oppose working in Georgia if the state's fetal heartbeat bill becomes a law. The bill, HB 481, would ban abortions if the heartbeat is detected, which is usually around the 6th week of pregnancy. I've never seen a nation so, can I use this word, hell-bent? So hell-bent on destroying human life. But that's what we have today. How people celebrate, how potential mothers who are carrying a newborn baby in the womb will actually go out there and celebrate with joy that I just had an abortion. In other words, I just killed the baby that was in my body, and go out and relish it with joy and celebrate. And if you don't think it's happening, watch the news, because it is. What a blight on our society that we live in today. And God is going to put a stop to that one day. It's a hideous, that even God says that the sins of the nations don't even do what Israel does. And now we see why he said that in his Bible. All right, let's move on. Last week we began talking about a medieval diseases that flare up because of unsanitary conditions. What we were talking about is laying a foundation, where God talks about in the last days that there would come famines and pestilences. And in our mind, you think of these pestilences that maybe are in another country, that couldn't happen here. But what we're beginning to look at, because of our society, because we have absolutely ignored the laws of God that bring about health, the sanitation, the prosperity, and just threw God out of the picture to do what we want to do, because of that, we're finding the blight across this country in the most prosperous times that we've ever lived in this modern century now, beginning to see this blight across our nation of people just living out on the streets in filth and squalor and drugs. And what it's doing, it's bringing back diseases that the United States thought was done and never been seen here today. because of the immigration that's coming in. We've seen measles outbreaks that's coming in from people from other countries, and because of the not having the vaccinations that's been going on because they thought it was licked. This was the beginning. So from time to time, as we said last week, we would begin talking about this from time to time, because what is going on is that we're looking at is a foundation of sickness and disease that will begin to lay dormant until God allows it to raise up and become a pandemic across the world, including within our own borders. Now, when we said that, I had no idea that I would be coming back this week with another report. Now, when we covered that last week, I had no idea that we would be going into that this quickly right now. So now we're going to talk about Ebola, the Ebola virus. That's something you've heard that's in this faraway country that really can't come here. The last Ebola outbreak we've had, in fact, the National Geographic had a 3-night special, and if you hadn't seen their special, they'll probably replay it. It runs total 7 hours, I think it was, total about 7 hours. It is an amazing story, and it's a true story of the Ebola outbreak in '89, talking about how it can just run rampant. Well, we had another touch of it. I believe it was in 2013 over in Texas. It actually killed another person simply from one person coming from the Africa who was a carrier and brought it into the United States and started to affect people when they got sick over here. So now, with all of that said, and it's terrifying because there was no cure for this, and it spreads rapidly, and when you get it, it's being spread and you don't even know you have it yet. So now, let's take a look at this. And again, like I said, if you haven't seen that special, you need to look at that. Ebola. The Congo Ebola outbreak is growing. It's growing over there because they can't stop it yet. So hundreds of illegals from Congo are fleeing the Ebola in overwhelming San Antonio. All right, so what has that got to do with us, and how in the world is Ebola affecting San Antonio? Let's take a look at this and see how this is progressing. The DR Congo's Ebola outbreak now, cases have doubled in just 2 months, crossing the 2,000 mark. Now this is spreading over there, and they can't stop it. They cannot keep it in check. So this is a warning, or is this a warning of things to come? And I believe it is, because the scripture actually talks about this toward the end time and talking about pestilence. This is out of Johannesburg. Over 2,000 cases now. It says the latest Ebola outbreak is now the worst after the West African epidemic from just a few years ago. The World Health Organization says that the Congo's deadly Ebola outbreak is now the second largest in history. When I got that first report, that's what it was. It was the second. But in just a matter of just a couple weeks now, it has grown to where it is now the largest epidemic. It's no longer the second, it is the largest. So now, why is that important for you and I? Because what's happening over there is now beginning to affect the United States. When you see these things taking place, all of those people who are fearing for their lives are beginning to flee that nation, but they're not coming into the United States through normal channels. They come through normal channels, they would have certain checks, go through health inspections. That is not taking place. So now, let's show you what's going on. And what I'm about to show you should alarm everybody who sees this program. So what I'm going to ask you to do, when you see this, I'm not trying to create a panic. I'm trying to create an awareness. This is critical that we understand what's going on, especially in light of what God says there will become pestilences at the end time. These things can lay dormant and show up at just about any time when we least expect this, all right? So pay attention. Let's go through this. Let's tell you how it's beginning to take place and how it ties in with another prophecy where God says He will remove our hedge of protection. All right, so now let's go through this. All right, so what I'm put up here now is I put a map up and a chart. Now, this is not the best map of the globe, but this is the closest one I can find for what I really needed. So now, the Ebola and the Congo and the illegal immigrants. All right, so now let's put this together and show you what's been taking place and what immigration has been able to determine from talking to the people who are now in San Antonio. So the Ebola outbreak is over in the Congo and in Angola, right? So here's the headline I just read you a few moments ago. The Congo's Ebola outbreak cases have doubled in just 2 months across the 2,000 mark. Doubled. literally doubled in just 2 months. I don't know about you, but that's pretty alarming, and because they're trying to catch it and they're being aware of it, and the nation knows about it. So now, if you lived in this country and have all this going on, you want to protect yourself, so you flee, you leave the country. So what are they doing? They're fleeing the country, and they found their way in to Ecuador. This is amazing what they did. This was orchestrated. They planned this. Somebody knew what they were doing. So they go through Angola one way. Either they flew in, and my guess is they probably came the second way, came in through ship, through Ecuador. The reason I say this, I have not confirmed this yet, but from what I understand, from the interviews when they were talking to those who were in San Antonio, they asked how they got there. They said they were traveling with about 350 to 400 people. You can't get that many people on a single airplane. And it would seem like if they came by plane, they'd have to have several planes being able to come over, and that would have alerted and alarmed a lot of the news. But they didn't. So what they do is, you see here, is the route coming all the way through, and they found a port of entry where they can come into the United States. They go through Ecuador, they go through Central America, they come through the borders of Mexico, and that's part of the reasons the president has told us that they need to have Mexican guards at the southern borders, things that they're not telling us here in America, that they said that this is a global problem. This is a real problem for the United States. What's going on here is because this now has become a corridor for other countries who are fleeing to get into America. They have found a channel that they can break through. All right, they'll be able to break through into our borders. God says He will remove our hedge of protection. So now here we have potentially, and this is worrying many people in the United States now, potentially carriers of a virus. And listen, I'm telling you, they may be 100% free. I don't know. But here's the problem. Nobody knows. Even the people who are inspecting and talking to these people, they don't know what's going on. So they find the way to come into the United States. They make their way up through Central America, through Mexico, and through illegally just simply cross our borders. And they've now wound up in San Antonio, Texas. Here's another problem. San Antonio, Texas is not the final destination. They are going to be transported again and spread across the United States. They're only being held up right now in San Antonio because they're looking for interpreters so they can be processed to decide if indeed they can be left to stay in America or not. So this thing is becoming out of control. So that's what we're looking at and some of the concerns of where we are. If they can do it, now think about this, if they can do it, so can terrorists. So can people with dirty bombs. Because this is like wide open. It's wide open. If they came in through normal channels, they would have to go through inspection. Now, has anybody traveled? Have you flown lately? Have you seen what you have to go through to get on a plane? Here you have them coming from other countries now, no inspection. Now, we just recently came back from Trinidad. And you got to go through several checks and balances. You have to go through, did you bring in anything? Do you have any food? Do you have any, everything you go through to make sure you're not bringing any disease or problems or pestilences into America. But we, in the infamous stupidity of our government officials who refuse to lock down the borders and to protect the country, have left this whole corridor wide open. And this is just the beginning. Why is it just the beginning? Because God says, because you have refused to obey me, I will remove my hedge of protection, and you're going to pay a price, God says. You and I are at the beginning of these prices. And who knows what's coming in that's just going to lay dormant. During World War II, they had what they call sleeper cells. In Germany, would bring spies over here. And they would just lay dormant sometimes for decades until it was time to raise up and create havoc in America. Well, Satan works the same way. He's bringing disease, epidemics, and anything he can to destroy this world. And when it's time and God removes his complete protection, then you're going to see this world begin to tumble, even here in the United States, and it's prophesied to happen. And you're witnessing it right now at the very beginning and the foundations of these things. It's time that America wakes up. It's time that God's people wake up and pay attention. So I'm asking, please, help. Share this program to everybody you know. They don't have to believe it at this time, but at least share it with them. Because God said in the Old Testament, he says, whether they listen or not, doesn't matter. Go tell them. When it's time for them to listen, God's going to knock them on their heads. They're going to wake them up and going to be given a chance. That's when you're going to see the innumerable multitude come out of the tribulation. That's when the work of God will kick into high gear. And you'll see that innumerable multitude that God's going to put into care of God's people to let them know that Jesus Christ is coming back to save this sin-sick world from destroying itself before it's all over. So anyway, when you see this, I just had to stop and put this in from last night. We threw that in this morning because it's really, really important. Look what Matthew 24 says. We brought this out last week. Nation shall rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilence and earthquakes in various places. So that's where we are today. And as God says, these are only the beginning of sorrows. So that's what we're looking at. God says he's removing that hedge. You've heard me reporting on that today. So let me read you the scripture where I'm referring to. It's in Isaiah 5, verses 5 and 6. He says, and now please tell me what you'll do to my vineyard. I will take away its hedge, God says. It shall be burned. I'll break down its wall, and it shall be trampled down, and I will lay it waste. Well, that's what we're looking at right now. It's hard to imagine our hedge of protection being torn away that it is. And it didn't have to be this way. But because of the absolute, utter stupidity of mankind and the leadership in our government, God says he's going to move the wisdom of the wise. Well, it's gone. And he would sit around and hear there's such stupid things going on today rather than taking care of business like it should be. You know, if these people were in business, running business, they'd be fired a long time ago. All right, I got one more I want to bring out. Now, this is not to do with Ebola, but it is immigration because this is crazy how fast this is getting out of control. This was just 6/10, I believe that was Monday. All right, illegal immigration, 9 times the rate of 2017. 9 times the rate, projected to outpace the Obama time. Take a look at this. Look at all those people coming in. I mean, they're working their way to America. All right, illegal immigration at the United States-Mexico border last month was 9 times the level of the same month 2 years ago. It's projected to outpace every year when former President Obama oversaw immigration when they thought at the highest during President Obama's administration. Well, that's not even going to be close to what's going on right now. And brethren, we have not begun to see the decline around the world when people begin to starve and you see things out of control. This is only the beginning, as God says, of sorrows. We need to wake up and we need to be prepared for what's coming. All right, we need to be prepared. All right, let's take a little break here. This is our version. I'm laughing because I know what you're going to see already. So this is our version of a Father's Day commercial break. Take a look. I'll be right back in just over a minute.
If you're a dad, you're not afraid to work hard.
Never give up.
Never compromise.
And the best dads always look for ways to get better.
I'm looking for something to energize me.
I'm looking for something to push me further.
And I'm looking for something to go with these nachos.
Dad Fuel, the energy drink designed just for dads.
So I can finish the fight.
So I can finish the race.
So I can finish mowing the lawn. And later on, I might watch some golf.
The fuel dads need to do the things dads do.
Climb the highest peak.
Go the furthest distance.
Check the scores. Read the newspaper. Give amazing relationship advice. Why are you crying? You should really talk to your mother about that.
Dad Fuel comes loaded with taurine, ginseng, and 100% of your daily recommended value of Hi Hungry, I'm Dad.
I start every morning with the 4 Ds. Devos, donuts, Dad Fuel, down blanket. Breakfast of champions, baby.
Now available in 4 bold flavors: Original Orange, Grow Model Raspberry, Growmaster Mango, and I thought I told you to take out the garbage grape.
You can't touch my passion.
You can't touch my drive.
And you definitely can't touch my thermostat. No way.
So whether you're thirsty for victory
Or just plain thirsty. No, seriously, it's empty. Can I get another one?
Dad Fuel.
Because I am fearless.
Because I am unstoppable.
Because the players on TV aren't gonna yell at themselves. Come on! Throw the ball!
Well, welcome back. Well, y'all fueled up. I was laughing in advance because that's our version of Dad Fuel. So, all right, you ready? Let's keep going. All right. I want to begin a new series today that I've been waiting for weeks now to be able to bring to you. It's called Follow the Money. And this is something we're going to be talking about for quite a while. Because you watch the news, and the news can lie to you about anything they want to. But if you want to find out what's really going on, you follow the money. I get up every day and I watch, I believe it's CNBC on our networks here. And it's a financial network. And they talk about the money and where things are going because they're not going to be tricked by the news, especially the fake news. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to begin talking about following the money and the central bank purchases, and the central banks are ditching the dollar for gold, and begin to talk about how this all plays into prophecy and the fulfillment of the fall of the United States. All right, so now, is this a warning of bad things to come? It's amazing I used that exact same write-up, all right? The exact same write-up for the Ebola. Is this a warning, all right? Is this a warning? And it is. This is a warning. Central banks backed up the truck, as this article says, for the gold in 2018, buying 651.5 tons versus 375 tons of gold in 2017. So what they're doing is they're banking their reserves, not in dollars, not in euros or anything else. They're reserving it all in gold. All right, it's being reserved in gold. And it's being increased. It's actually being increased. That's the largest net purchase of gold since 1967. So when you go back into the 60s, you look at the turbulent years of the 60s, because we are in a time that's very reminiscent of the 60s with the turmoil. You had the hippie movement. You had the free love. You began to talk about the abortion back then, the Vietnam War. All of these things were taking place now. We're in the exact cycle now that we were back in the 60s. So when the rest of the people are looking at the world and the instability of the nations, what do? They put the security in gold. That's what you're looking at right now. So 2019 now is showing it will surpass 2018. And 2018 was the largest buying purchase since 1967. This year is going to be even more. Let's talk about the gold purchases now. The World Gold Council's reports show that the foreign governments and central banks have been buying a lot more gold than in previous years. The net gold purchases first quarter 2019 among foreign governments and central banks was nearly 70%. You ready for that? Last year, 2018, was the highest gold purchase since 1967. The first quarter of this year is 70% over last year. So you can begin to see the uncertainty and the concern that the people who follow the money, where they're putting their money in gold. All right, greater than first quarter 2018 and the highest rate for the first quarters in 6 years. The Chinese, so now, while we listen to the trade talk and how all these things are panning out, behind the scenes now, the Chinese in particular, have been stockpiling gold faster than ever, while at the same time, the Chinese ownership of the U.S. Treasuries as a percentage of total holdings has been gradually declining over the past years. So what we're looking at when you see all these trade embargoes, trade things going on and all the fights taking place, very quietly behind the scenes, they're moving out of the dollar and they're moving into gold. And they're building the alliances, as we have been reporting, by the way, over the past few months. They're building more and more alliances with the other nations to be able to divest themselves of the United States and the U.S. dollar. When they divest themselves of the U.S. dollar, you will begin to see, if they move it away from the oil, you begin to see the decline of the United States. When that day happens, it won't take long to see us begin to fall and ruin this nation. So these are the things that you want to watch for, all right, so you'll be aware that you don't get caught unaware. Let's go on a little bit further. All right. It says, in gold we trust, waning confidence in the U.S. sends world central banks on a buying spree. This is another article. This is from the RT. Governments around the world have recently been on a gold buying spree. These countries have a tactful reason for doing so. The reason is it's directly tied up to the anticipation of the inevitable end of the U.S. hegemony. Now, when I typed that in, you see us, that should have been a capital. the end of U.S., United States hegemony. In other words, they know that this is coming to an inevitable end. They're watching what's taking place. They're watching our debt, and they watch what's going on in America. They know it's unsustainable. It seems like everybody knows about it, but the people who's in the government office here in the United States. But the rest of the world knows it. So why are they doing? This is their hedge of protection, because they're going to protect themselves and wait for the United States to make the inevitable collapse. And it will come. It will come when God says it's time, and he pulls the plug, and you're going to watch this country go down. Please don't get caught up in how great the United States seems to be doing financially today. That is one of God's ways for you and I, as we look at the 7 years of lean and 7 years of prosperity that we've witnessed from the Old Testament. We could be in the potential 7 years of plenty right now. God giving his people time to prepare for the return of Jesus Christ. We're talking about that in Roaring Seas. Now, if you haven't got that sermon, it will be coming out in just a couple of weeks. We offered it in the card last month in the newsletter, and I encourage everyone, please get that two-part series, Roaring Seas. I'm telling you, it's going to open your eyes to things that's happening that we have not paid attention to before. So now, all of this, everything we're talking about, it's like this giant ball that's building and beginning to roll downhill and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And if you're not paying attention, it's going to roll right over you. Let's look at this here. The head of Russia's second largest bank, Andrea Kostin, stated in a speech last year, "The reign of the dollar must end. This whip that the Americans use in the form of the dollar would then, to a great extent, not have such a serious impact on the global financial system." So they're looking, they're waiting, and the time will come. Please, don't put your head in the soil and think that this is not going to happen, because it's going to happen. Seems like the rest of the world knows it, but us. Now, what about the nuggets on all this? What does God say to see this? All right, so when God reveals a piece of a puzzle to the insight was not yet fully understood, he expects us to take action to follow and obey that understanding. Each new piece of insight adds to the established understanding of the previous known truths. So now, let's examine two of the previous slides, two I just brought up, and pull out some important information that brings about conflicting interpretation. Conflicting, in other words, when you read something, how do you read it? All right, so where do you begin? Look at Luke 10:25 and 26, but I want to bring this first. First, we need to keep scriptures in focus. There's a big difference between a "thus says the Lord" in the Bible and what God has left for us to interpret for the future, for us to strive to interpret. In other words, there's things that God says, this is the way it is. It's point blank, there's no doubt about it. But yet there's other things that God hasn't completely clarified. Look what it says in Luke 10, verse 25 and 26. It says, "Behold, a certain lawyer stood up and tempted him, saying, 'Master, what shall I do to inherit eternal life?' So Jesus says to him, 'What is written in the law, how readest you?'" Or another way to say that, how do you read it? So when you have something in the Bible and it's open for interpretation, how do you read it, is what God's saying. How do you read that? So I'm going to talk about that. So here's the concern. All right, the concern is when prophecy becomes news, it becomes the here and now. That's what we do on this program. We take things that God talks about in prophetic times coming, and we put them into the here and now. Because many of the prophecies today you're living through right now, just before the return of Jesus Christ. All right? So sometimes what we were taught, we assumed must happen, doesn't necessarily apply. So sometimes what we think is going to happen doesn't really happen. All right? So God gives more insight. Daniel 12:9 proves that. He says, "Go your way, Daniel, for the words are closed and sealed till the time of the end. So many shall be purified and made white and tried. But the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. Watch you therefore, for you know not what hour your Lord comes." So what God has given to us, he's given us a panorama of things to look for, like the season of the fig tree. You begin to look at all these different events that have taken place. Many of those events have taken place since the time of Jesus Christ. That's why sometimes you hear people in the church say, "Oh, we've always had that, we've always had that." And they put off the current events, not realizing that things that are happening today has never happened before. That's what's going on right now. So now when we get this new insight, God expects us to do things. So now, let's go back into the slide to what I was telling you a few minutes ago and try to make some sense of it and show you how this all works. All right, so now, this is repeating. All right, is this a warning of bad things to come? All right, so if so, then what? All right, so the move into the hoarding of gold should be an alarm to all of us, but it should also be a trigger to begin to raise our awareness that the storm is getting closer. All right, the storm is getting closer. Because of that, our preparations should be heightening. So in other words, if we know there's a storm coming or there's a hurricane coming, if you live in the Midwest, you don't have a lot of time to prepare when an alarm sounds for a tornado. All right, so you got to be prepared. So you make long-term preparations so when it happens, you have a short window to be prepared for. Hurricanes are a little different. You have a little bit more time. Same way with the end time, what God's telling us. You have time to prepare, but you need to begin preparing if you're not prepared yet. So now, in gold we trust. All right, so this is one I brought out before. In gold we trust, warning confidence sends U.S. world central banks on a buying spree, right? In gold we trust, right? So now, let's take that, what we had just a few minutes ago. Now let's begin to decipher it against the prophecy and try to understand what we're supposed to be doing. All right, in Ezekiel 7, verse 19, it says, "They shall cast their silver in the streets, and their gold shall be removed. And their silver and their gold shall not be able to deliver them in the day of the wrath of the Lord. They shall not satisfy their souls, neither fill their bowels, because the stumbling block of their iniquity." So when we see that, the teaching of the churches in the past, and I believe some of the churches of God today still teach, don't worry about that because your gold and your silver is going to be worthless. In fact, it said they'd be throwing gold in the street. That's actually not what it says. It says this, is that the gold will be removed. It is being removed right now. And the silver they'll throw in the streets, all right? The silver they'll throw in the streets. So now, the interpretation in the past was, so don't worry about any of this. In fact, they said you don't have to worry about anything because you're going to go to a place of safety. Even if that were true, it doesn't tell us how long from the beginning of the day of the Lord in the time of the wearing out of the saints, because there's coming to a time of the wearing down of the saints, all right, until God begins his 3.5-year tribulation. So if you're not prepared and you do nothing, how long are you going to last? They're going to come take your home away? Are they going to take your car away? You have no way to get to work? What are you going to do? There won't be any work. May not even be any programs like we're bringing you today. So now, so what do? You do nothing? All right, because that's what we were told in the past. So now, what I did today is I brought you up to a question to show you this is what was done. Here we are now. What do we do today? Next week, I'm going to begin to examine that verse where you're looking at right now with understanding compared to the insight from decades ago. So how do we do this? You always begin asking questions because you want God to lead you to the answers. You begin by asking questions that pertain to your future. So now, when you read a verse like that, here's the first question. Does this mean we shouldn't prepare? We literally had a guest speaker in New Orleans a few years ago when he was talking about the return of Jesus Christ and telling the brethren, don't prepare for anything. It shows you a lack of faith. He said, don't even store one single can of food. And I heard him talk like, this is insane. What is this guy talking about? But that was the teaching of the church, that if you prepared and saved things and prepared for the tough time, you had no faith. Unbelievable, but that's the way it was taught. So if I do prepare, if it does it mean I have a lack of faith? We'll talk about that. If I prepare, what should I be doing? All right, we'll be talking about that. Should I invest in silver and gold? Or does this verse tell me not to because they'll be worthless? Is that what the verse is telling us? Well, not necessarily, but that's what you were told in the past. What about food? What about water? What about the necessities of life? How do you prepare for all of that? If you got at least 3.5 years of tribulation, does that mean you do nothing? And you just sit there and wait and ask God to do everything for you? Or does God give us examples in His Bible of things we're supposed to be doing as the time draws closer? All right, we're going to talk about that beginning next week. This is going to be a longer series. We're going to take piece after piece after piece. We'll also be talking about it in sermons. But it's imperative that you understand, especially in light of Roaring Seas sermon, the two-part sermon I'm encouraging everyone to get. All righty. So much for all that. A lot to talk about. All right, when we come back, we're going to take our news, nuggets, and insights. We're going to talk about a parenthetical insert and what that is that deals with Ephraim and Manasseh. All right, let's take a look since this is Father's Day weekend. We have a PragerU video on why God is a He. Take a look.
One of the criticisms many people make against the Bible is that it depicts God in male terms. The most obvious example is God is referred to as He. Why did the Bible do this? Well, here's the answer. Because the Bible is preoccupied with making a kinder, less violent, more just world. If you share these goals, and I suspect you do, then you'll have to agree the Bible made the right decision. Before I explain, however, I need to add an obvious caveat. The God of the Bible is neither male nor female. God transcends gender. What I'm talking about here is why God is depicted in male terms in the Bible. Gender-wise, the Bible had three choices: masculine, he; feminine, she; or neuter, it. We can readily rule out neuter. For one thing, neuter nouns don't exist in Hebrew, the language of the Old Testament, which, after all, first introduced this God to us. For another, the biblical God is a personal God to whom we can and must relate, and we cannot relate to, let alone obey or love, an it. Aside from the language issue, the Bible depicts God in masculine terms because, 1, the Hebrew Bible's primary concern is making a good world; 2, a good world can only be achieved by making good people; and 3, the people who commit nearly all the world's violence are males. Therefore, it is in both men's and women's interests to depict God in the masculine. Here's why. Without a father or some other male rule giver, young men are likely to do great harm. If there is no male authority figure to give a growing boy rules, it is very difficult for him to control his wilder impulses. As President Barack Obama told an audience in 2008, children who grow up without a father are 5 times more likely to live in poverty and commit crime, 9 times more likely to drop out of school, and 20 times more likely to end up in prison. Commenting on that speech, Dr. Alvin Poussant, a psychiatrist with Harvard Medical School, confirmed these statistics. The absence of fathers corresponds with a host of social ills, including dropping out of school and serving time in jail. In other words, if one's primary goal is a good world, specifically a world with far less murder, child abuse, theft, and rape, a God depicted in masculine terms, a father in heaven, not a goddess, a mother in heaven, must be the source of moral commands such as do not murder and do not steal. If the father figure / rule giver that boys need is not on earth, a morally authoritative masculine God can serve as an effective substitute. Any discomfort you might feel with the masculine depiction of God is not comparable to the pain we will all feel if boys are not civilized into good men. To transform a wild boy into a good man, a male role model is as necessary as a male rule giver. So when the Bible depicts God as merciful, compassionate, and caring for the poor and the widow, it is not so much interested in describing God as in providing a model for humans, especially males, to emulate. If God were depicted as female, young men would deem traits such as compassion, mercy, and care for the downtrodden as feminine and would not identify with them. But if God, their Father in heaven who is strong, on occasion even a warrior, cares for the poor and loves justice, mercy, and kindness, then these traits are also masculine and to be emulated. The argument that girls equally need female role models to avoid violence is objectively not true, because the problem of mayhem and violence is overwhelmingly a male one. Of course, girls need female role models, but not to avoid violence. And, like boys, girls are more likely to obey a male authority figure. A report released by the Minnesota Psychological Association concluded, in a study of female inmates, more than half came from a father-absent home. It is therefore ironic that some women are attempting to render the God of Western religious morality less masculine, because if their goal is achieved, it is women who will suffer most from lawless males. We have too many absent fathers on earth to begin to even entertain the thought of having no father in heaven. I'm Dennis Prager.
Well, welcome back. Well, as a little side note, let me bring out, which reinforces the male figure, is you ever wonder why the Catholic Church is called the Mother Church? The great counterfeiter? And how about all the churches that come out? They're her daughters. How about that? Interesting, huh? It's a counterfeit, because God is masculine. And you ever wonder since the 60s why there's been such an attack on the male figure? It's because it does not want to recognize God, the Father. Just a little side note. All right, let's go on now. Let's talk about our nuggets. All right, this is parenthetical insert. And you may not have heard that term before, but it certainly relates to several times in the Bible talking about especially the prophetic events that come toward the end time. All right, so now, what is a parenthetical insert? It comes from a Greek word which means parentheses. Now, we've always said, when you put something in parentheses, right, what did you do? All right, you have signaled it out and you have centered it in the middle of something, right? So the meaning is an injection or an insertion, literally putting in to the middle or putting into a subject, right? The parenthetical insert is an explanatory or a qualifying word, clause, or sentence that is inserted into a passage. There are those throughout the Bible that does that. It's simply the way things are written. So I'm going to take and talk about the clause. All right, we're going to talk about a certain clause that goes inside of a verse. All right, there's this clause or the sentence that goes into it. So now I'm going to give you a couple of examples. Let's begin with the first insert, which is basically a comma. All right? This is something the world doesn't understand, and it's completely misrepresented what the Bible teaches, simply because a parenthetical insert of a comma was placed in. Because in Greek, the scriptures that I'm about to show you did not have a comma. It was put in when it was translated into English. It's found in Luke 23, verse 43. So when Jesus said to him, "Truly I say to you, today you shall be with me in paradise." Now that is the way you normally read it when you read the Bible. You see, I say unto you, comma, which is not in the original text. Today you shall be with me in paradise. All right, so the interpretation is the thief with Christ is in paradise that day, which creates a real problem, because Jesus didn't go to heaven that day. He was in the grave for 3 days and 3 nights. So the thief could not be in paradise that day, right? Because Christ said he's going to be with him. So the comma has created a problem and a misunderstanding. So now, let's look at it again by moving the comma and see how it changes the entire meaning of that sentence. Truly I say unto you today, you shall be with me in paradise. All right, now that entirely changes the meaning of the sentence, right? See where the comma is? So now, in the first one, it's telling you today you're going to be with me in paradise. In the second one, it's saying you shall be with me in paradise. What is that? He says, I verily I say unto you today. So this one here now, let's take a look, implies that the thief would be in paradise on that very day, where simply by moving the comma, the parenthetical insert, it tells when Jesus is telling the thief about paradise, not when he's going to be in paradise. How about that? Just move a comma. That's all it takes. changes the whole meaning of the contents of the sentence, all right? So you're with me, all right? So you can see how important it is when you come to a parenthetical insert to be able to understand the interpretation of the Bible, all right? So now, the parenthetical comma inserted in the wrong spot has completely obscured the meaning of the sentence and as a result has deceived mankind. How about that? Just a simple little comma. Now, I gave you all of that to talk about two sentences inserted to explain a prophecy about Ephraim and Manasseh. All right, the first example that's given is relatively easy to understand. So I'm going to use that one first that we make sense of because it's easy to understand to explain the one I want to get to. So now, I use this to help to explain the second example, which is much more complex and thus more difficult to understand. So now, the first example. It's found in Revelation 20, verse 4 and 5. It says, "And I saw thrones, and they that sat upon them, and judgment was given to them, and I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Jesus, for the word of God, which had not worshipped the beast, neither his image, and neither had received his mark upon their foreheads or in their hands, and they lived and reigned with Christ for 1,000 years." Verse 5, "But the rest of the dead lived not again till the 1,000 years were finished." This is the first resurrection. All right, so now here's the crazy thing. The rest of the dead lived not again till the 1,000 years were finished. This is the first resurrection. So this is the first resurrection is placed right behind where the people are talking about the second resurrection. So it's very confusing when you look at it this way. And why it's written that way is because of a parenthetical insert. But the rest of the dead lived not again till the 1,000 years were finished is a parenthetical insert. It was placed in like an afterthought, all right? Right there. So there's your sentence, and that's where the confusion comes through. However, if we do this, we reverse these two. We reverse those two sentences. We take the parenthetical insert out, and we place it where it's supposed to be, where it's not like an afterthought. Now the sentence makes sense. Okay, now it goes through this. Let's go back to verse 4. All right, so back to verse 4, I'll pick it up. It says, "Neither had received his mark upon their foreheads or in their hands, and they lived and reigned with Christ for 1,000 years." This is the first resurrection. Thus, the rest of the dead lived not again till the 1,000 years were finished. You see how much sense that makes? It makes absolute sense. It really hasn't changed anything except where it looks like the first resurrection is focused on the second resurrection. It's not. It's because of the parenthetical insert. There, all right, so that makes sense. Really easy to understand that way. With that understood now, let's go back into the Old Testament to talk about Ephraim and Manasseh. This is the second example. The blessings on Ephraim and Manasseh. Now, let me qualify something before I tell you this. Is that Ephraim and Manasseh are the sons of Joseph. The church had always taught that we are Manasseh, that Ephraim is Great Britain. But Ephraim is the younger brother. In other words, Manasseh existed before Ephraim. So the understanding has always taken a lot of explanation because of a misunderstanding of a parenthetical insert. Now, if you don't believe it and you want to keep the way you believe, that's okay. It doesn't change the fact that this are Joseph's sons. But the truth is, Manasseh's not brought out into the end-time prophecies. They're pretty much washed out of the picture. But Ephraim's not. And so you would think that Great Britain would come back into power and be in the middle of all of this at the end time. And it's not. It's Ephraim that is, the younger brother. So now let me show you what I'm about to say, and then take some time to prove it out for yourselves. And if you just say, oh, no, it's not the same, we're still both Joseph's brothers. No harm, no foul. However, if you look at it the other way, you'll begin to realize where the United States plays a vital role toward the end time. All right, so now, verse 12. "So Joseph brought out from between his knees," talking about his two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, "and he said, and he bowed himself to the face of the earth. So Joseph took both of them, and Ephraim in his right hand toward his left hand, and Manasseh in his left hand toward Israel's right hand, and he brought them near." Because they always took the oldest with the right hand. And so Joseph had him set up a certain way because his dad couldn't see well. But God had inspired Jacob, which became Israel, and he changed his hands to put the greater blessing on the younger. The more powerful and the greater blessing on the younger, not the older, which Joseph tried to correct. That's what's going on here. So Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it on Ephraim's head, which is the younger, not the older, which is completely reverse of the way things are usually done. And setting left hand upon Manasseh's head, gilding his hand unwittingly, for Manasseh was the firstborn. All right? And such, Great Britain was firstborn before the United States. The second example, all right? So let's go on with that. In Genesis 48, verse 15, so he blessed Joseph and he said, God, before whom the fathers of Isaac did walk, that God which fed me all my life long to this day, the angels with whom redeemed me from all evil, bless the lads and let my name be on them. Now this is a side note, I just put it in there because those tribes carry the name of Israel. Ephraim and Manasseh carry the names of Israel because God shows us that Jacob's name was changed to Israel in Genesis 32, verse 28. Because the United States does not understand who Ephraim and Manasseh is, Great Britain and the United States, they have no idea when they talk about the United States that we are modern-day Israel, whether they realize it or not. And because they don't understand that prophecy, they are completely ignorant to how things are going to fulfill at the end time. That's a side note, but I wanted to bring it out while we're here, especially if you're new to the program, so to give you something to go study. That's not to absorb. I understand that, but take the time to begin to understand it. So now, so the name of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth. And when Joseph saw that his father had laid his hand upon the head of Ephraim, it displeased him in his father's hand to remove it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head, to put it on the oldest. All right? Going on. So Joseph said to his father, not so, my father, for this is the firstborn. Put your right hand upon his head. And his father refused. And he said, I know it, my son, I know it. He shall become a people, and he shall also be great, he says. But truly his younger shall be greater than he, and his seed shall become a multitude of nations. So now, what we're looking at here, now you have the parenthetical insert. Is like now, because Great Britain had all these nations that they had conquered in years past, the way this was written, it seems to imply that Great Britain would be the multitude of nations, where the United States is composed of a multitude of nations. So now, let's take a look at that. Here's a troubling sentence, and this is where primarily, all right, primarily all the understanding comes of who Ephraim and Manasseh is. So now, let's do the same thing we did in Revelation, and let's read it again. He says, his father refused and said, I know it, my son, I know it. He also shall become a people, and he shall also be great, and his seed shall become a multitude of nations. But truly his younger brother shall be greater than he. All right, so now you have Great Britain being the multitude and the younger brother being the greater of the two. And the United States today is greater in its power and scope today than Great Britain was in its power and scope back then. Even though they did conquer many nations from around the world, they had nowhere near the power of the United States. And Ephraim is the one who's involved with all the prophecies towards the end time. So again, that's a parenthetical insert that we're looking at, which helps change the way we look at things from Joseph's sons of Ephraim and Manasseh. Does it change what we believe? Not in prophecy, not who we are, we're Joseph's sons. Does it change how prophecy will portray by the nation when you understand it? Yes, because then it helps to determine what God is doing at the end time. You know, I wanted to bring that out to you. A lot of information to try to absorb into it. Just a little technical point that I wanted to bring your way today. All right, that's it from the home office now. Let's get finishing our program. So we had last week, we had the Tale of Two Churches went out. And the Father's Day, the transformation by me from 2018. We had the two sermons. In the mail 2 weeks ago, the newsletter and the DVD offering. I'm bringing it here because I talked about it today. You need to get the Roaring Seas. In just a couple of weeks, we'll have it out, and it'll also be online, so you can watch it then. As you can tell, I'm rushing through because I can see I have run over time again. All right, here we go. Another. These are great little videos. Stuff You Never Hear Dad Say, Part 2. Take a look, and we'll come right back in just a couple minutes.
Life is always fair. I really enjoy repeating myself over and over again. I just love when the kids talk back to me. I don't care if you get a job this summer. I don't care if you get detention. I can't open this jar. See if Mom can open it. Just take your time in there, okay? No means maybe. Hey, why don't you bring that ball inside and play with it? Hey, don't put that back where you found it. Just leave it on the floor. Ew, bacon. If you put a dent in the car, it's really no big deal. It's 10 a.m. Go back to bed. Look, whatever your friends are doing, just do the exact same thing. I got more than enough sleep last night. If your friends are okay with it, then I'm okay with it. Stop signs are just a suggestion. You don't need a chaperone. You don't need a seatbelt. You don't need a savings account. You should buy the jeans with the holes in them. Hey, we're all gonna go to church, but you can just sleep in, okay? Could we please just hang out in here for another 10 minutes? Hey, can we get some more bickering back there? All right, bills. Yay, traffic. Woohoo, taxes. Yes, laundry. Hey, can you kids come in here and jump on my bed? Quick, go tell Mom what happened right away. You don't need to finish your dinner. Hey, look at your phone when I'm talking to you. I wish I had a smaller TV. We got you that phone for a reason. Texting boys. All right, everyone, listen up. Mom and I are going out of town this weekend, so please, mess up the whole house while we're gone. Please throw a few parties while we're gone. Please forget about the dog entirely while we're gone. Hey, when you're finished pouring that, can you just leave it out on the counter all day? Thanks. What are you doing?
I'm gonna bungee jump out of this tree.
That's a really good idea.
All right, what a great little video. Well, that's it for our program today. That's our Father's Day special with our little videos just for you. Well, I hope everyone has a great Father's Day weekend. And just remember, from all of us here at God's Unchanging Word, thanks for watching and have a great week. Oh, and don't forget, share this with everybody you know. They're going to love you for it, or not. Till next week, God be with you. Take care. We'll see you then.